Hi, everyone. This lecture is called What is Dramatic Writing? So let's begin with some basic definitions. So dramatic writing is kind of an umbrella term that covers storytelling that takes the form of a script designed for actors to embody. This would include playwriting, which is designed for presentation live on a stage, as well as screenwriting, which is designed for presentation as a film or television show. Um, Even something like writing for the radio, audio dramas, podcasts, could fall under this umbrella of dramatic writing. So, what unites these different kind of subgenres here is this fact that we are writing roles for actors. And that sets dramatic writing apart from other forms of writing, for example, fiction. And it also has a couple of implications. So, first, it means that dialogue is going to be more central, more important in dramatic writing than it is, say, in fiction. Um, in fiction, we can, if we're the author, we can write lots and lots of exposition describing the scene, describing the character's backstory. We can't do that very well in dramatic writing. All that information has to come out through dialogue, which makes it a very interesting challenge. The other implication is that dramatic writing is inherently collaborative. You will be working with actors. You will be working with a director, potentially with designers. And this is, I think, one of the most exciting parts of being a playwright, the opportunity to collaborate and to see, for example, what a director will see in my script that I might not have seen myself, what actors will bring to my roles that I might not have ever imagined. So, what does a piece of dramatic writing actually look like on the page? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on formatting in this class, but I do want to introduce you to it, especially if you plan to go on and pursue dramatic writing after this class. You'll find that theaters, for example, will often ask for scripts to be in a certain format. And so it's helpful to know what these formats are. So let's take a look. So what we're looking at here is what the Dramatists Guild calls modern play format. It's a little bit frustrating as a playwright that there is not one set format, standard format for plays. The closest we can get is what the Dramatists Guild recommends, and they have two different types that they recommend. So this is close to what I use. And again, this is called modern play format, and you can find this example in the handout section of this week's module. So what do we have here on the first page? You'll have the title of your play. You will have a short description of the kind of play it is. So if it's a full-length play that has 2 acts with an intermission, you might say a play in 2 acts or a full-length play. Is it short or is it a 10-minute play? You can say a 10-minute play. By your name, put some of your personal information here. And then we have a cast of characters. So here you're going to want to list each character and provide a brief description of them. No need to go on and on. Provide what is the essential information that a casting director needs to know. So things like age, like gender, possibly race, ethnicity, maybe something about their personality, like the kind of person they are. If their occupation is important, you could add their occupation there. So brief description of each character, the setting, a brief description of where the play takes place, and then the time period. This is the minimum of what you'll need on a title page like this. Some theaters and contests might ask for more. They might ask you to include a synopsis for example, a brief summary of the play, or a list of scenes, and things like that. You can change and personalize depending on what the theater wants. As I said, I usually follow this format fairly closely. I want to show you the example of a title page and character list from a play of mine. This is a play called Dead People. Full-length play. There is my name and information. Here are my characters. So you can see this is a two-character play. We have a bosun, and I give his pronouns here. I say that he can be played by any race or ethnicity. I give his age, and then I give a short description of what's his role and what's his personality. And notice I don't go into too much detail here, but what are kind of the key things that an actor would need to know about this character? And then I do the same for the second character, Poppy. I include a note here, and I do this. I like to do this in my plays to encourage diversity in casting. And that's something that you can include. You as the playwright can include any notes you want under your cast list about the actors that you would like to inhabit these roles. I kind of combined place and time here. The morgue at a small hospital, present day, not in the time of COVID. And then here, I include a couple of other notes. Here's a synopsis. So a synopsis should be about a paragraph long, give the basic plot of your play. And I give a couple of other notes here that are going to help the actors both read the script and interpret the characters, okay? And here we have the first page of the actual script. So we have scene number. We have opening stage directions. The font here is Times New Roman 12, a fairly standard font. You can't really go wrong with it. Note that character names are in all capitals. Note that dialogue is under the character name, and then a double space before the next character begins. And here we have, right? So here we have a line of dialogue from a character. This is my first line of dialogue. Here we have what's called a parenthetical. All right, so this is a note about what is this character doing while they are saying their line, or how are they delivering this line? The main thing to keep in mind about parentheticals is not to overuse them. If you use them too much, it can start to feel like you're micromanaging the actor. So you want to leave some freedom for the actors to decide how to deliver lines. My general rule is if there's something about the line that the actor couldn't tell from the text how I want that line delivered, I'll put in a parenthetical. But this is how it would look. All right, we continue here. This is a stage direction. So character B pulls out a cell phone. Here we have another couple of parentheticals, right? So specifying that character B is delivering this line while talking into a phone. Here I specify there's a pause. Pause is another thing that I would say don't overdo. Again, leave some of that up to the actor. All right, so that is basically the way that you do it. Scene page numbers should be up in the top right corner. I should mention that there are software programs that will help you format. I know a lot of writers who use a software called Final Draft. And basically it does the formatting for you so that you just have to type in the lines and the stage directions. That sounds great. I'm old school. I like using Microsoft Word. I just do. I find it, I don't know, just a little bit more flexible. but it's completely up to you. What about for a screenplay? Screenplay format is a little bit more set. There's really one standard format that you need to follow. First thing you'll notice here is similarly to a stage play, you'll have the title of the screenplay, and you'll have by and your name. What's different here? It's the font. So if you're writing a screenplay or you're writing a television episode, Courier is the font. Courier or Courier New, size 12. There you'll have your information. And here are some of the elements that you might see in a screenplay. The beginning, fade in, right? This tells us, okay, we're opening the film. This is the setting and the time. So you'll see EXT period, that means exterior. That means we are looking at, we're outside. All right, so we're looking at, in this case, an apartment building, and it's day. Here's a description of what we're seeing. Then I have a little bit of a camera cue here, dissolve to interior. Now we're inside the apartment. Interior apartment, day. Character A, again, you're going to put the characters' names in all capitals. And you'll put a brief description of the character, like their age, and maybe something about their personality. Character A, here we have him, he, or they, I don't specify a gender here, sits on a couch. Beside them lounges character B, 31 years old, hungry and bored, right? So give us a sense of who these people are. What are they doing? And now we have dialogue. Okay, so you have the character names in all capitals. You have the dialogue underneath. Same thing applies here to parentheticals, right? So if you want to specify a character doing some action while they're speaking, or if you want to specify the way that a character is delivering a line, again, try to use that sparingly, but this is how you would do it. Here's how you would show an action. Here you might notice the word phone is capitalized. Sometimes important props or important sound effects, you'll see them capitalized in a screenplay. Here we have a cut to, and now we're someplace else. The neat thing about screenplays compared to stage plays is it's a lot easier to shift locations. Here we're at the interior of a pizza place moments later. I'm introducing character C, and character C speaks into the phone. There is character C's line. We're going to cut back to the interior of the apartment moments later. And here it is. And this short, rather boring little film is complete. Again, if you want to see this template, it is in the handouts folder in our weekly module. So let's head back to our slides here. We now know what a script looks like on paper, but that doesn't tell us what elements it needs. So what do you need in order to have a strong, compelling play or film or television episode? Let's go way back to something like 300 BC. And the Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote or spoke of this. And Aristotle had 6 principles of tragedy. Now, when he says tragedy here, he's referring to ancient Greek drama. I would say that these 6 principles apply to comedy as well. They would apply to film as well. So maybe we can call this the 6 principles of dramatic writing. So here they are, roughly in the order that Aristotle thought that they were important. First, plot. So what happens, right? Plot is what happens in the story. We can't really have a story where absolutely nothing happens. Character, all right? The characters are who we watch, who we're rooting for, who we're rooting against. what Aristotle called diction or dialogue. Then we have song, and the thing to note about this is this does not mean that you have to put songs into your plays or screenplays. If you're writing a musical, that's great. But otherwise, no, you don't have to put in song. In Aristotle's time, there literally was song in every play. But what we can take from this is, if not song, a sense of rhythm. That could be the sound that we hear in the background. That could be the rhythm of the character's speech. All right. So, and we'll talk later about finding ways to incorporate rhythm into your work. Idea or theme. So that's the message that the story is grappling with. Those are the ideas, the themes that you're trying to portray or to delve into with the work. And finally, what Aristotle called spectacle, which has to do with how it looks. So things like costumes, the setting, the scenery. If you're writing a film and there's a big car chase scene and things blow up, that's part of the spectacle. And that, of course, is an important element, even if Aristotle may have listed it last. So these are the central elements that we need. But before we can have any of them, we have to come up with an idea. So this is the initial question of, what do I write about? Maybe you already have a story in mind that you want to tell. Maybe you're already working on a story that you're in the process of telling. Maybe you have no idea, and if you're in that place, I have been there, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, what are some ways that we can come up with ideas for plays or for films? I want to start out with showing you the example from some established playwrights. So this is August Wilson. And he said, well, I generally start with a line of dialogue. Someone says something and they're talking to someone else. I don't all the time know who's talking or who they're talking to, but you take the line of dialogue and you start from there. The next thing you know, you've got 4 pages of dialogue. And after a while, you say, well, let me name this guy. Let's give him a name. Who's talking? And in the process of him talking, you find out things about him. And the more the characters talk, the more you know about them. So that's one possibility, starting with dialogue. Or this is another playwright, Julie Jensen. For me, the impetus for a new play is usually the issue, something I'm thinking about, or more probably something I'm having trouble with in my own life. Frequently, it's something that pisses me off. The issue then goes in search of its characters. So that's a different approach. This is more starting with theme, or starting with what is the situation that I want to bring onto the stage. Or here's another one. This is Marcia Norman. When I was first starting to write, John Jory asked me what I wanted to write about. I said I didn't know, I just knew I belonged in the theater. And then he gave me this advice. Go back to a time when you were really scared and write about that. Being afraid makes you remember details, and details convince people a story is real. And chances are, if you were scared by this, other people will be scared of it too, and that will make them pay attention. So here are 3 very different ways of beginning a play, right? And the point is, there is no one right way of this is how to start a play. This is how to come up with an idea. There are a couple of guidelines that I want you to keep in mind when you come up with an idea. How do you know that it's going to be an idea that will give rise to a play or a film script? How do you know that? How do you turn an idea into an actual story? So 3 things. Number 1, the idea must give rise to characters, right? It's the characters who are going to embody this idea. Those characters, number 2, must want something badly. And three, there must be conflict as a result of those wants. So if you can take an idea and turn it into characters in conflict over differing wants and objectives, you have the spine of a play. You have the blueprint for a play or a film. I want to go through an example from one of my plays. This is a play called Ageless, which was staged in San Francisco in 2017. And I started with that question, what if? And the what if that I asked was, what if there was a world in which no one got older? And so I came up with this idea of, okay, there's a world where everybody takes a pill when they get to be about 25 years old, and it freezes them physically in their 25-year-old bodies. So they no longer age. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe even something that will come to be in the future. But at that point, it was just an idea. It was not yet a play. So first, I needed that idea to give rise to characters. So I started thinking about, okay, in a world like this, what kind of characters might there be, and how might those characters be in conflict? So I came up with the character of a woman who decides not to age, not to take the pill, and I named her Marin, and kind of started to develop her psychology about why she doesn't want to take this pill. And then I thought, okay, so who are some characters that she could be in conflict with? Because conflict is the engine that drives a play. So I came up with the character of her mother. And I decided that her mother does take the pill. And so eventually we get to the point where her mother actually looks younger than the character Marin. And at that point, I started to put in other characters. And I then outlined the plot. And this spark of an idea from that what if question ended up becoming a fully produced play. So that was my path. Your path might be different, but if you bear these three principles in mind, you should be able to move from an idea to a play, to the spark of a play, or a film or a TV episode. Now, another thing you might be wondering, once you have this idea, is this a story that I should write for the screen or for the stage? There are some key differences between these two genres. So let's start with the screen. If you are writing for film or television, generally you can have more characters. When you write a stage play, every time a character comes on stage, you want that character to have enough to do to justify having somebody embody that character. So you generally don't see extras, background characters in stage plays. Generally, you want to tell the story with as few characters as you need for the story. Whereas in a film, it's common to have many background characters, many extras, characters that maybe only have a line or two. Similarly, in a film or television show, it's easier to have more locations. You can very quickly cut from one location to another. In a stage play, if you want to change set, it will take time. Actors will need to go off stage, crew will come in and physically move that set and create the new set. So generally, stage plays tend to have fewer locations. So keep that in mind. In a film or television show, you can do different camera angles. You can do close-ups on an actor's face, which might help the audience understand their emotional reaction. If there's an important prop, you can do a close-up on that prop. Those are things you can't do with a stage play. And then generally a film or a TV episode will have a soundtrack. And often filmmakers will use this to enhance the emotion of a scene, whether it's an anxious scene, a comedic scene, etc. So given these advantages of writing for the screen, why might someone choose instead to write for the stage? Well, because some of these other elements are not available for playwrights, it makes dialogue that much more important. Everything about the character's emotion needs to come out through the dialogue. And so if you are somebody who really loves dialogue, as I do, this can be an interesting and a fulfilling challenge. More dynamic. What do I mean here by dynamic? Dynamic means changing. When you stage a play, um, every production is going to be slightly different. A line will never be delivered in exactly the same way twice. And if you have multiple productions, you'll have different casts. So characters can be embodied by different actors. And of course, this is different from a film where once you get that final take, it's kind of frozen forever. Now, there's a flip side here. Sometimes actors forget lines. They can't do another take like they can for a film. If you're on stage, you forget your line, you have to keep going and make it work. Sometimes unexpected things happen. I once had a staged reading of one of my plays in which an actor fainted. Thankfully, the actor was okay. That was, of course, not something that we intended to happen, but it did make it memorable. So think about the possibilities for a stage play to be more dynamic. And then because you have a live audience and you have actors and the audience sharing the same physical space in a stage play, tends to have a more of an intimate feel, a more of an interactive feel to it. So again, there's no one right answer here. Think about the story that you want to tell and think about which genre would lend itself better to telling that story. To illustrate some of these differences, you'll find that one of the assigned readings this week is a short play of mine, a 10-minute play called Mr. the Bear. And what I would suggest doing is reading that play first, and I wrote it for the stage. It was then adapted into a short film. So once you've read it, then click the link to the short film adaptation and ask yourself, what are the differences? What is gained by making this a film rather than a stage play? On the other hand, are there things that are lost? All right. So that brings us to the end of this lecture. Next time, we'll be taking a look at character and how to create dynamic, interesting, multidimensional characters. I'll see you then.